Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. If this is your first time on one of our webinars, we are so pleased to have you. And if you've joined us before, you know that these conversations are intended to share tips, tools, and strategies for creating trauma-informed environments. My name is Kim Sanders, and I am the president of Ukeru Systems. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. You are listening into your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, please select telephone in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed there. We are eager for this to be as interactive as possible. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing them into the questions panel of the control panel. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session before we end today's presentation. In addition, we welcome you to join us throughout the conversation on social media by using the hashtag #StartsWithYou. A few other items we wanted to make you aware of is that a copy of this presentation will be distributed in the next few days to everyone who signed up. And we are also recording the conversation and will post this on our website later this week. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to Jodi Whitcomb. She is the Director of Organizational Development and Training at KidsPeace. Ukeru has had the pleasure of working with KidsPeace for some time now. To say that we are like-minded in our missions is truly an understatement. Jodi has led a movement in her organization to ensure that a trauma-informed approach is applied not just to the clients, but most importantly, to the staff as well. She has spearheaded some truly innovative approaches in her organization, and we are so excited to have her share those with you all today. Welcome, Jodi.
Hi, Kim. It's so good to be here today.
It truly is great to have you with us. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about how KidsPeace began its journey to creating a trauma-informed environment for your employees?
Well, sure. So in 2017, we came across Ukeru Systems. One of my colleagues, Chris Berry, who you'll be having as a guest in a future webinar, attended a conference with you, and he came back very excited. He shared this information with me and a few other of my colleagues, and so began our journey with really partnering with your organization to bring Ukeru Systems to KidsPeace. But amidst our implementation of Ukeru, we realized very quickly that the comfort versus control philosophy did not only apply to our kids, that this type of philosophy had to apply to our whole community. And we had had a critical incident response team at KidsPeace for some time, but it was not operating maybe at the level we really wanted it to operate. And that probably was because it wasn't integrated into that community or into that philosophy in the way that it really needed to be until we really started to look at a whole cultural shift when we implemented Ukeru. When we built Ukeru into our culture at KidsPeace, we also built in many other things, other choices, alternative interventions that our staff could use with our children, so that they didn't feel like we were just taking things away from them, like some of the more restrictive interventions that have been kind of always part of behavioral health for many, many decades. No matter where you worked, it was just part of what we did in behavioral health. But they didn't feel like we were just taking those things away, but instead we were adding things into the environment that were better and healthier for our kids, that we also wanted to add healthier interventions into the environment for our staff. And this all happened really simultaneously as we were implementing Ukeru. So what you see on the screen right now is the KidsPeace Critical Incident Response Team that was in place, and you'll see two logos there, both for Cert, which is what we call it for short, the team, which is the overarching team, and then something called Oasis Space, which I'll get to in a minute. So if we could just go to the next slide. All right, so when we refer to KPCert, what we're referring to is a team that is formally trained. There's about 30 of us at KidsPeace, and we have it's centrally coordinated through a leadership team within KidsPeace Cert. So there's a number of us, probably 4 or 5 of us, and we are part of the leadership team, and we coordinate it so that it's available to respond to potentially traumatic events. And we say potentially traumatic because what we don't want to do is overly pathologize any event that happens in our environment. We know that people are resilient, and we know that everybody is different. And if you understand trauma-informed care, we know that different people respond to different events differently. So we don't automatically assume that people are going to be traumatized. We say that events are potentially traumatic. So we refer to them as PTEs. So when they occur within the organization or our community, and we see that people are showing signs of trauma, then we have various different ways that we respond. So if we could please go to the next slide. We're activated in work-related potentially traumatic events. We sometimes will respond to type 1 traumas, which are those bigger type events that have kind of a large impact. It's like a one-time event. We will respond when work-related compassion fatigue sets in or vicarious trauma sets in, either for one associate or maybe a group of associates. We will be responding when there's a PTE that has happened within a neighboring community. So just so you know, we don't just respond to KidsPeace community. Sometimes we will respond to a neighboring agency or to a school or someone in our neighboring community that has experienced a PTE. In fact, we are responding this week to one of our neighboring agencies that had, it was an outpatient facility that had a father of a young child that was coming in for outpatient services who overdosed, unfortunately, in the waiting room while the child was in therapy. And so we have a team that is going out right now, actually, as I speak, to respond to that agency. That's an example. We provide individual and group meetings to debrief potentially traumatic events. We provide psychoeducation, and we connect people to resources beyond what our team provides. We provide something called Oasis Space, which I will talk about in a minute in more detail. And beyond that, we also have provided support, training, and consultation either before, during, or after the crisis situation. So even to just plan how you will respond, because we know that sometimes things happen and people who are in leadership have never faced something like this before. And so they will call us saying, you know, we really need help. This is beyond us. We've never had to deal with something like this before, and we have provided consultation. Okay, can we please see the next slide? How are we activated? We're activated in a number of different ways. The information that a potentially traumatic event is somehow brought to the leadership team of Cert. It could come to us through a member of the Cert team themselves. It could come to one of the leaders through our employee health team, either our human resources team, or through just an incident notification system that happens within the organization. Any associate, contractor, or board member could contact a member of Cert, and they have, or a member of the neighboring community could contact Cert. We've also had a number of people who used to work at KidsPeace that will then maybe go work for another organization, and then they say that Cert exists at KidsPeace, and something happens in their new agency, and they will call us and say, I know that you do this, could you please come? And that's an example of what happened this week when we got called. All right, could we go to the next slide, please? All right, so I wanted to bring up this slide only because I think this is something that, there are a lot of people that are on this webinar today, and even though you're not here to learn necessarily how to be a CERT team, whenever I get a chance, I try to impart this knowledge to people, because one of the things we've learned as a CERT team is that in our business, even though we're in behavioral health, I have learned that we do not know automatically how to notify each other of loss. You would think this is something that would come to us naturally. Unfortunately, in this type of work, in the CERT team, we often have to notify people of various types of loss often, and we have learned a thing or two about it. What's the quote, better way to do it? Is there any really good way to do it? No. There are better and worse ways depending on the circumstance. You're never going to have a perfect scenario. So what you do is, it's on a continuum, and so you try to do the best you can in the given situation under whatever circumstances you have in front of you. And so wherever you are, whenever you're getting this information, you kind of assess and say, okay, how much information is already out there? What do people already know? How quickly have I found out this information, and how much can I control the message? Because we know it is better to inform someone individually and in person than it is to do it in a group in person. It is better to inform people in a group in person than to do it over the phone. It is better to talk to somebody in a phone conversation than it is to communicate this information in a text message. However, it's better to use a text message individually than to send out a group email. But it's better to do a group email than it is for people to just find out on social media and etc. So you see how none of these are necessarily always you would never use it, but depending on whatever situation you're in, one may be better than another, and every situation you're in is going to be different. One thing that we never want to do is ever inform an associate of any kind of loss in the presence of clients, customers, or visitors. So that's kind of our rule of thumb. You might be surprised to know how often that happens, though. Another rule of thumb I want to share with you is that loss activates loss in a trauma-informed environment, that when people feel loss, they of any kind, whether they know the person or not, they could connect it to other losses in their lives. And this is why you can dramatically underestimate the impact of what you're going to be dealing with. This is a huge mistake that leaders make in a situation. If I had you here in front of me, I would ask you, I would say, what do you think is the biggest response I get when I say, how do you think things are going? Do you think you need support? The biggest answer I get is, I think we're okay. I think we're fine. This is often the biggest mistake that people make. They think they're fine and they think they're okay because they are dramatically underestimating this little blue sentence that loss activates loss, because you're only considering the people you think that have been directly impacted by this event. You're not considering people who have been activated by this loss with other losses that are in their life. But the truth is, everybody's going through things, right? So if something happens, like this father who overdosed in the outpatient office, there were 4 people that were directly impacted. There were 4 people that saw it happen, but there were a lot of other people working that day. Who knows what's going in their life, that they may have known that happened or heard about that happening, and now they're struggling. They're dealing with other types of losses. It's activating them. We dramatically may underestimate the impact in our community because we don't take that into account. We can go on to the next slide. So when the CERT members themselves respond, we want to make sure that we're taking their mental health into effect as well. So our staff on the Cert team are also our associates. So we have a number of things that we do with them after they respond. They also have to come to a debriefing. When, recently I I responded to a school where a girl had made a very serious suicide attempt during the school day. And when I went there, people still had blood on them. There was still blood in the environment. And so when I came back to KidsPeace, I needed to attend my own debriefing as a Cert responder so that I could debrief seeing that myself. And so we make sure that we do that with all of our Cert responders. We encourage self-care before, during, and after the responses, making sure they get bathroom breaks, that they're eating, that they're hydrating. We don't need anybody not taking care of themselves on the team itself. So we're giving support to our associates through the Cert team, but we're also giving support to the Cert team itself. We track responses. The ring of hearts you see there on the screen is actually my ring of hearts. Every member of the Cert team gets a heart after every response. All right, so if we can go to the next slide. Our Cert members are specifically trained about trauma, not just to the extent that we're already trained in trauma-informed care, but also as it specifically relates to traumatic events that they'll be responding to, as it relates to compassion fatigue in the workplace, and also vicarious trauma as well as burnout. Let's go to the next slide. One of the types of responses Cert does is what we call comfort responses. This is when we get to an area where people are in distress due to something happening in the workplace, and the only thing we can really offer in the immediate environment is basic care and concern. We may be giving them breaks, addressing physical needs, maybe offering a quiet show of support and being present. It may be that something has happened, but we're just finding out this information. So we may be given information that is okay for us to share. We've been told we can share this information. So we're able to respond and give answers to them so that they can start to put this together in their mind. We also will sometimes create a safe space away from the regular environment, but is close to the regular environment. So they don't have to really go far. They can just take a break for a really short period of time and then go back into the environment. An important point to remember here is that people who are involved in these events often are still working. And so part of what Cert does is enable them to continue working. We're not necessarily taking them completely out of commission. In some cases, we do need to do that, but that's rare. Mostly we're helping them continue to work, that we're meeting their needs so that they continue to work. Most people will not allow themselves to leave their teams in times like this. They want to be there for their teams, and so we provide the support they need so that they can do that. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what does this space away look like when we create a space? So Oasis Space was really, you know, the saying that necessity breeds invention. So when you really just are at the end of your rope and you don't know what else to do, we kind of were at that place where we had a part of our organization that was really struggling, and we had been to that part of the organization a number of times to do debriefing. But what we were finding was what we had available through Cert at that time was really only appropriate for type 1 trauma, which is, as I said earlier, type 1 trauma, if you don't know, is really just like a big one-time event that's very, very serious. Almost like, to give you a really clear example, almost like a tornado coming through town, like a big disaster, but only like in your life. or like a car accident or something like that, where it's really one event and then it's over, and you kind of have to heal from it. That's what a type 1 trauma is. Whereas a type 2 trauma is more like a chronic, long-term exposure to traumatic stress. And these people were showing signs of that. They were in a high-stress work environment. They were showing signs of compassion fatigue. They were showing signs of vicarious trauma from being in the KidsPeace workplace for as long as they were, and really working as hard as they were. They were showing some signs of burnout. And there were many, many things they wanted to talk about, but when we would go around the circle, every single person almost really needed to talk about something different. And so we realized that the structure we were using was not really fitting the issue. And so we felt like what they really needed was, the ability to reduce that, the ability to know where they were in terms of vicarious trauma and burnout and compassion fatigue, to have an understanding of those dynamics and what to do about them, and to be able to try some different techniques and figure out what would work for them, because everybody's so different. Some people like some things, some people like others. We wanted it to be trauma informed. We wanted it to be consistent with our new culture. We were committed to this being completely mobile. We wanted to go to the people. We did not want to force them to come out of their environment, because we know that when people are feeling traumatized, they're less likely to move out of their environment. They kind of almost get paralyzed in a way. We also wanted it to be customizable, so that every time you experience Oasis Space, it's a little bit different. We wanted there to be choices. We wanted it to be able to meet the needs of different personalities and interests, but we also didn't want to forget educational material and things that would help connect them to the next step in resources in case they needed more help than just what we were providing, which is something we were already doing with the more structured response, and we didn't want to lose that with creating this Oasis Space. So let's go to the next slide. So here are some of the activities we provided. So we have something called an art and think kit, which provides various different types of work with your hands, from watercolor to adult coloring to journaling to puzzles. It is by far one of the most popular kits, where people sit down and they just kind of work on something that appeals to them. There's various different activities that are in that kit. We also have something called experience bins. There's probably about 6 different experience bins that have various different items in them. And a lot of people will say to me, oh, this is just like sensory stuff. Well, it's a little bit different. I mean, yes, some of these things do have sensory side to them. Yes, they do. But it's more than that. They engage adult minds in kind of a different way than they do kids. And so we do have, like, for example, we have a garden bin where when we've had people who have passed away, and you can arrange your own garden, and in this bin, people will arrange like memorial flower arrangements in memory of this person. And it's been very helpful and cathartic for the adult to do that. We use kinetic sand, and people will create sculptures in the kinetic sand or create words in the kinetic sand, and it's been very helpful. By far, the favorite experience bin for adults is the lentil bin. I've had people say, I'm making this for my office. I've had people make them for their office. I've had people say, I want one of these for Christmas. It's really interesting to me the way people have really gravitated towards that bin. Also, on this slide, you'll see on the bottom right-hand corner these magnetic these magnetic balls. They're very, very tiny. I don't know if you can tell from the picture, but they're extremely small. People will literally spend, I have here a time frame 20 to 45 minutes, but it's very, very hard to pull people away from these. They will make these little designs with these little magnetic balls. They will sit there. I have colored ones, and they will organize them by color. So they're very effective, and we've had people that will buy them for themselves. And that's really the whole point, is that people come in and they try different things, and then they find, yes, this is something that I could do on my own. This is something I can then transfer to my office or to my home, and I can really use it. I will tell you, we do use some types of squishy objects, but we're very particular because adults do not like slime. I will tell you that. I know some of you are laughing at your screen right now because it's true. They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want it. They don't even want it in their house, those of you that have kids. And so they certainly don't want it at work. And so we don't have anything like that, nothing goopy or anything sticky like that. It's all stuff that is appealing to adults, that they find a stress reliever. Usually it changes color when you squeeze it. That's really appealing to adults. And all of these items we've really kind of gone through and tested to see what is most appealing to adults. Let's go to the next page. We've collaborated with some therapeutic animal organizations that have brought in some dogs, some therapy dogs, which have really been wonderful, and they've partnered with us in Oasis Space. We do not have our own dog, although not because we don't want to have our own dog. I would love to approach my CEO and saying that Oasis Space needs to have its own dog. I'm not sure how that's going to go over, but I would really love that. We do have one of our members who is certified as a trauma-informed yoga specialist. She leads gentle trauma-informed yoga mini sessions. We don't do that with every Oasis Space, but I got to tell you, when we do it, it's really wonderful. You can see two of the pictures, one in the top left and one on the right-hand side, are actual pictures of Oasis Space going on. We do some scent, some aromatherapy in some cases where it's appropriate. We don't always do it, but we have done it. So this just gives you kind of a sampling of some of the things that we do with Oasis Space. We just received a $2,000 gift from the KidsPeace Auxiliary, which we've been able to add a station called eCalm, which has iPads and earphones, and we're going to be loading a whole bunch of calming applications onto the iPads. Our goal here is for people to try out different apps before they have to buy them. So we're going to be loading up these apps so that people can sit at a table and try different electronic calming apps. I think that's going to be a huge hit, especially with our younger population. We really want people to try these out and not have to pay for them to try them, and then maybe go home and say, okay, this one was really worth it, and I'm going to take this one home. So it just arrived. It's actually in my office right next to me right now, and we're going to be adding that. Our debut is probably going to be on March 18th for that one. We have an Oasis Space scheduled on March 18th, and we'll be having eCalm on that day. So let's go to the next slide. You see a picture of what we hope eCalm will look like. We also have a little sloth on this page. He is kind of our unofficial mascot because he reminds us to slow down and take it easy. We also have been using some weighted, those mats that you put in the microwave or you can put in the freezer, and they're either cold or warm, and people put them on their shoulders. And we also use hard candies that are either cinnamon or peppermint for people to hold like on their tongue. So we really try to hit the five senses so that but it's more for the purpose of having something that's really well-rounded that everybody can try, not so much because we want to provide a sensory diet, but because we want there to be enough options. And so I hope that I've given kind of a sense of what Oasis Space is. I certainly have not shown you every single thing, because we have, I think, 12 bins now that have hundreds of items in it. And what's really nice about that is every time we go out, we kind of pick and choose what we're going to take, so that if you participate today, it will look different today than it will tomorrow. So there's always a variety of items. And we can go to the next slide. Some of the survey responses you can see are always very high. We just ask, have you enjoyed Oasis, and would you recommend it to others? Always in this 3.7, 3.8, 3.9 range. People really enjoy Oasis. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the comments, which we've had hundreds of participants. The surveys are great feedback. We've actually implemented some of the things that people have suggested. You see here that they talk about the great stress relief, that it's awesome. People like different things. The tone, we really do try to create a peaceful tone. It's a quiet space. We really discourage people from making it a party atmosphere. People want there to be a permanent space like this everywhere they work. Their biggest complaint is that they couldn't stay longer. All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so as you see at the top, I have this thing where the pink logo for Cert and the blue logo for Oasis, and then I have this two-headed arrow. And what we've learned, remember when I said in the very beginning that we did this, we had this very structured kind of group debriefing that we did for a long time that worked very well for type 1 traumas, and that it wasn't really working for this one area of the organization, and we had to come up with something new, and then we came up with the Oasis Space, and it's been a great success. We've been doing it a lot for our own organization. We've been doing it a ton outside of our organization. We actually had our first purchase of Oasis Space this year, which was so exciting for us that people wanted it so much that they actually purchased a program from us. But what we found, which is amazing, is that we started doing a new thing, which is when we do debriefings with people in the group, like we've always done before, we've started to bring some of Oasis into that space. So what we've been encouraging people to do is to have something in their hands, like a stress ball, or if we're at a table, they can have a coloring page in front of them, or there are people that want that lentil bin in front of them or something. And as we go around the room to reconstruct what has happened in more of a type 1 trauma type situation, to the extent that they want to, they are at the same time they're talking, utilizing Oasis items that appeal to them while they're talking. The trained responder is leading them through this process. So what they do is they go around the circle twice. And in the first time around, they do in a very specific way, they reconstruct kind of what happened. But it's different in the way that we don't push them to say everything. We have them say what is coming up in their mind the most. We have them talk about the thing that's bothering them, or whatever they feel they want to get off their chest, which is a little bit of a different approach than we used to take. We used to push a little bit more, which is more consistent with critical incident stress debriefing that you may have heard about from, say, like war veterans and things like that. But we pulled back from that a little bit, and we still keep the same structure without pushing quite so much. And we still encourage them to talk, but we don't push them as much. And then we go around again and we have them describe the types of reactions that they have had in their body, in their mind, in their relationships since this time has happened. And we do that in a structured way. And the whole time, they are using the Oasis items, and we don't have the whole room set up like we do when we just do Oasis Space, but they're using some of the items. And what this is doing is it's allowing the emotional energy they're feeling to be better managed. So two things happen. They're more likely to talk. If they initially felt they didn't want to talk, they're more likely to talk. And it also helps them feel more comfortable as they're talking. So they calm down. They're more able to say what it is they feel they need to get off their chest because they have something in their hand that they're using. And we're able to keep them in the room so that then they can hear the education that they need, which is essentially to say to them, you're not crazy, that what you're experiencing is really unusual. And I will tell you right now that in our field, you know, we tend to, you know, minimize our experiences. We tend to make it seem like, oh, this is just what I deal with. You know, it's no big deal. When really these things are a big deal. They're a big deal, okay? And we want to validate that. And we make sure that they know that what they've been through has been significant, okay? And then we take them and we make sure they get connected for long-term support, okay? Let me see. I think we have one more slide. Let's go on to one more slide. Okay. So the goals of that, like I said, are for them to share their experiences in a supportive setting, to help them better process what's happened, to validate the seriousness of that event, and to provide psychoeducation about what they can expect in the next couple weeks, that they're typical, that they're transitory, that they will not, that they will go away, and if for some reason they don't go away, to connect them with resources. And so this Oasis debriefing is a little bit more structured than the Oasis Space, but it still has some of the same comforting attributes. It's less pushy, it's less forceful, it's more comfort versus control than maybe what we used to do, if that makes sense. So I think we've come to the end of my formal presentation, and I think I'm told there might be a few questions, and so I'm going to turn this back over to Kim and let Kim let me know if there's any questions I can help with or that Kim can help with.
Yes, thank you so much, Jodi. That was wonderful. And again, what I love just, you know, of course, because of our involvement with KidsPeace, we're very aware of both Oasis and the Cert team. I think we've been on site and seen both in action, which was amazing. And, you know, we were also able to actually witness your staff with the Oasis and how much they like that.
Yeah.
You know, I find it so interesting listening to you that, you know, everything does go sort of hand in hand with the whole idea of comfort versus control. And, you know, with your interactions with the Ukeru system as well, as, you know, when we started this, it was so important for us to make sure that we were sort of taking care of our staff, that I really don't feel that Grafton had done that very well in the past, that the focus was always on the kids and the clients, which again is normal and will always be, you know, top shelf for us, of course, but this whole idea of taking care of staff. So when I was listening, a couple of questions just from myself came up. And so I'd like to ask you a few, but while I'm asking, I please encourage other people to type in your questions for Jodi. You know, we have at least 20 minutes for her to answer some questions, so we'd love to get some questions for her. But Jodi, you know, one of the things I was thinking, this whole idea of compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
How do people go about helping someone to see that they might be experiencing that?
Well, we do it a couple of different ways, but by far the best way we've found is just to have them do the professional quality of life questionnaire, which is a free online resource. We think it's pretty excellent, and we offer it as part of Oasis. So part of the Art and Think kit, which is part of Oasis, is to sit down and do this little questionnaire. And the thing about the questionnaire is that you're supposed to take it numerous times throughout your tenure. It's not something you take one time and you're done with it. You're supposed to, I have my team take it every year. I want them to take it every year at the beginning of the year and just see where they're at. Are you dealing with it more or less than you were last year? Because I think depending, as you progress in your career, it can really change. And it can change depending on what's going on in your personal life too. And so sometimes people can talk about it and they just know they are. They can tell you, I know that I'm feeling compassion fatigue and I can tell you why, and this is what I'm experiencing. But sometimes people need to be convinced, and an objective questionnaire is really the way to go about it.
Gotcha. So we are getting a couple questions from folks in our audience. So of course I would rather make sure we hit those questions.
Okay.
Folks are asking, what is the average number of Oasis spaces that you would offer to staff?
So, well, we do Oasis Space several times a month, and we have about 2,200 employees, and we have about 1,000 of those employees, about 1,200 of those employees in the local area in Pennsylvania. And so we end up doing a different Oasis probably about 3 or 4 times a month, okay? What we've done is, since we started doing it at the end, I would say 2018 and all of 2019, that's about as long as we've been doing it. We started offering it as an orientation to staff. Like every once in a while, we'll do one as kind of like, come and see what it is and just experience it, even though maybe nothing difficult has really happened in your area of the organization lately, but we're just going to have it. Maybe there's a big potluck happening in your program this month, and we're going to have an Oasis Space in a room over here where you can kind of come through and see it. And then when your supervisor says they're going to have an Oasis Space in 3 months because you guys are all really seeming like you need something to, like you need it, then it's less of a, it's less of a scary thing, or less of a, like, what it is. So we offer it on demand of our supervisors and our leadership. We coordinate it through Cert. So it's just like, if somebody says, we're requesting a debriefing for a potentially traumatic event, we handle it the same way as a request for something like that, if that makes any sense.
Okay, absolutely. And so we have a question from Vince from North Dakota, and he's asking, at the building level, who are the members who should compromise your team, should be a part of that team?
Well, what I do every year is I have a new responder training, and people apply. So people apply to be a member of the team. They go through the training, and then the supervisor has to approve the person being on the team. So it's a collaboration between a person deciding they want to be on the team, me as the person training the person saying, yes, they've gone through the training and I think they have a good competency on the skills. And then the supervisor saying, yes, this person is getting all their work done, they presentation of my team. So it's kind of like 3-pronged. The person has to be interested, the trainer has to say, yes, they have good skills, and the supervisor has to say, yes, I support this. It's not something that you just, like, you volunteer people, you volunteer them. Yeah, right, like, I'm volunteering you. It's not like that. It's a collaborative thing. You have to be passionate about this work, or you're going to be on the team and you're going to be like the weakest link. So I have people who are clinicians, I have nurses, I have program leaders, I have bachelor level folks, direct care people, and I have a variety. I have people who are really well versed in emergency response, like natural disasters and things like that. And so what I do is, depending on what the emergency is, I will pair them accordingly. So
Gotcha.
so we'll put out so they're all trained on what the process is, and then I put out a call for availability. So I'll say, this is a Cert call for availability. It's a local response. It involves Oasis Space. I need 4 responders. Please let me know what your availability is on Thursday and Friday. And they'll all get back to me, and then we'll say, okay, we know what kind of response it is, so we'll say, okay, we're going to take these 4 people. You see? So, that's how we handle it. So that way we have a wide variety of people, and we're not, because we have some people that are really, really good but may not be a licensed clinical social worker, but are really good support people and can really do Oasis very well. That's the other thing. Like, they may not be a lead in a debriefing, but they're great with Oasis Space, you see? So they can fill different roles on the team.
Sure. And in general, how many referrals do you think your team gets in a month?
Oh, probably 10.
10, okay.
10 to 12.
People are asking, because people are just asking, like, in general, so like how much time, that would take up. Yep.
But I think you have to think about how big we are, and you have to think about how established our team is. It wasn't like that in the beginning. It took a while for us to get, and there have been times when we have said we're not available on that date. Can you be flexible on the date? Can we, you know what I mean? Depending on what it is they're asking for.
Sure. And do you know of anything like this being used in public schools for teachers? So, I mean, I know, like with Ukeru, we work with quite a few public schools, and we're creating trauma-informed environments, which of course is for everyone.
Yes.
But when you talk about these specific Cert teams or the Oasis Spaces, have you heard of this in public schools?
I know there's a lot of interest from public schools for this kind of thing. And I think the issue with public schools is time. A lot of people feel like they don't have a lot of time for anything extra. So I think there would be interest theoretically, but I'm not sure. I think it would have to work differently. I think it would have to work differently in a public school.
So one person's asking if you ever experience reluctance from staff to express their concerns in front of their supervisors.
Yes, and so sometimes we always work with the leadership in advance to determine whether or not the supervisor should be in the room for the debrief. And I think those conversations always go very well. It just depends on the situation. But yes, there have been plenty of times that the supervisor, and that has to, we didn't have time to get into that today, but that all has to do with the coordinating. Like, sometimes we will have a separate response for the leadership themselves. And so if there are supervisors, brief separate group, and that way the direct care or the other folks will be, they won't have to worry about having their supervisors in front of them.
Sure. So
it just depends on the situation.
Gotcha. So we have a couple questions around the cost. So, I mean, I think from all the questions and comments that we're seeing here, people like this. People are interested in it. They would like to know, like, how to do it at their organization. And so people are asking, like, is it really cost prohibitive? Or, like, so what are you thinking someone would have to have for a budget to do something like this?
You mean like if you were going to do a grant or something like that for something like this?
So for even, like, your creation of even a few Oasis spaces.
Yeah. So what we do is we have a core kit that we put everything together. And keep in mind, we've had everything kind of tested out, because it has taken us a year to figure out what works and what doesn't. And it's cost us a lot of money to figure out what works and what doesn't. And trust me when I say you don't want to go through that, you know. And so the core kit really has like the main things that you need to get started. And then there are choices. There's kind of like, there's kits that you can choose to get or not get beyond that. It's kind of like your pads. You can decide what pads you want and what you don't want, okay? And then there's some training that goes along with it, because like I've said before, you don't just take these bins, set them up in a room and leave. You know, you're with these people. You're in the room with them, showing them how to use this stuff, and you're talking with them. You're interacting with them as they're using the different items. So there's a component to that you have to learn how to do. It's a lot different than working with kids and working with these items. It's not the same type of thing. So, and what I want to say too is that the whole thing is customizable. So I've been working with people at KidsPeace to talk about the cost. You know, I do have a cost sheet that anyone could email me, and I'd be happy to send it to you so you could take a look at it, all right? Be happy to send it to you. But I want everybody to know that's out there is that if you're a small organization or a big organization, you know, certainly you'd probably want it customized to you, and we can certainly do that as well. So I don't think the cost is prohibitive, but everybody is different and their situation is different. So I'd be happy to send you the information so you could look over it. You can ask me questions if you like. I have that all down on paper. It's a lot easier than kind of going through and you scribbling it on like a Post-it note at your desk. So if you have my, I don't know if you have my contact that can be sent out, but share that with everybody.
And we can actually do that, because again, we're going to send this out to everyone who signed up for this webinar today. And so that's definitely something that we can include for people.
Sure.
So, you know, someone asked a question about a remote workforce. You know, that quite a bit of your folks are there on a single campus, but I'm assuming because, especially for, well, number one, your Cert team is mobile, so you can go wherever you need to go.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oasis is very much the same. So you have these bins. So I would think that would actually be perfect for a more remote workforce.
And we do not have everybody on one site, by the way. We absolutely have remote workers. Yep. We have a lot of different types of services that KidsPeace has. We have remote, like foster care offices and different types of community-based services that are remote. And we have taken Oasis on the road. I mean, that was the number one thing. We don't ever want this to become so big that we can't put it in a car and go somewhere with it. Like, that was our main, you know, we took my colleague's car, Jessica. She has a little tiny Mazda. I said, anything that doesn't fit in this car is not part of Oasis. You know, because we want it to be feasible. We want to be, and we did. We went to this little foster care office that had like 4 people working in it, and we set up Oasis, and they had the best time ever. And they were so grateful that we did that we just had 2 people get in a car and go there. And we just spent like a couple hours with them and talked with them about some things that were going on in their office, and they were having some, they had a couple of really difficult cases in the last couple months that had really, you know, kind of upset them. And they wanted to talk about it. And so they put the Oasis stuff out, and they talked through some of these cases, and they got some stuff off their chest. And when they left, they just felt so cared for, you know, that somebody would take half a day and go see them and spend that kind of time with them. You know, it was really wonderful.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more, just that idea of going, spending time. So there's some questions around, you know, any of us, regardless if you're at a behavioral health or if you're in a public school or a private school, we all know that we have issues with scheduling and staffing, and we know that can be difficult. So are you basically having people like come in early or stay late, or how are you guys doing that as far from a scheduling aspect?
Are you talking about the responders, or are you talking about the...
About having people experience the Oasis?
Well, every program is doing it differently, okay? So for example, in I'll give you our residential for example. So our residential program on every Wednesday, people come in at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock, and they typically have their staff meetings and their training on a Wednesday, and then the kids come back from school at 2:30 or whatever. So there's always that 2-hour block where everybody's there, and so they will take, if they're going to do something like this, they would do it on a Wednesday, and they would take some of that time and they would do it, right? So they just like they would take some of that time and they would do a training, or they would take some of that time and do a mandatory meeting or whatever it is, okay? Right. Sometimes they're doing it as a team building. They're saying, well, we need this as part of a team building. So just like anything else, you're investing in something that you think your team needs. And so just like I would bring them in early for some sort of team building or whatever, I'm bringing them in early for this.
Gotcha.
What I have found, it amazes me, what I have found is that all the people who have requested Oasis have said, we will do whatever we have to do to get it to our staff because it is so beneficial that we'll do what we have to do. Like I've had senior program directors say, set it up, we'll make it work. Mm-hmm. People who I know worry about productivity and the bottom line and overtime. I mean, I know that this is important to them. I know that it matters, but they will, look, we'll cut them out an hour early another day, or we'll figure out the schedule so that we'll minimize overtime in a different way or whatever. But we want them to experience this. You know, when it's a small group of people for a debriefing, it's not as much of an issue, you know, because it's just a few people. That's not really a problem. It's when it's a larger event. And so that's where we start to see people doing this as smaller events for like this small team of people or that small team of people. And that it works out pretty well that way, because then it's not as much of an expense. But when you're talking about exempt staff, that's not as much of a problem, like we do for the clinicians, or we'll do it for, you know, a support department or whatever, you know, then it's not so much of an issue. I'll tell you, I've been very surprised, but people have prioritized it. They have made it something that they want to do.
Jodi, this has really been wonderful. And I have no doubt that for everyone that's been listening, you've given them lots to think about, lots of great ideas to go back and talk with their leadership and folks in their organization, their coworkers, to try to replicate something like this. It's truly wonderful. I applaud you for everything you're trying to do for your employees. You know, it's sort of that whole, we have to take care of those who take care of others.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
true.
Thank you so much for being on here with us today. Again, for those listening, don't forget to follow us on social media. Also, again, this webinar will be on our website by the end of the week and archived with a bunch of others if you're interested in checking those out. And again, we really appreciate everyone in attendance, and we hope you have a great rest of your day and evening. And again, Jodi, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you.